Okay. There we go. All right. So very excited about this presentation called Making Connections Matters. Okay. So I'm going to get into the specifics of this slide. But before I do, just want to again reiterate to all of you, I am officially National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach.
Yeah, baby.
Yay, woo, yay. Well, I still need to celebrate a little bit. I got to figure out how to
Mazel
do that.
tov.
What's
Yeah.
that? Mazel tov, yeah.
You're
Very,
the biggest, you're the baddest, you're the best coach around.
thank you. I'm very so relieved. Obviously, you guys know how hard I work to take the test, pass the test, et cetera, and very much appreciative of many people on this call that have been with me through the journey of getting to this. So officially, it is official. There's now 7,000 National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coaches in America. As you guys know, I was Mayo Clinic trained, went through the intensive course last year and finished that. I am also board certified in lifestyle medicine, and I'm a registered pharmacist. So getting on to the presentation, as I mentioned before, there is going to be a little bit of back and forth. We are hardwired for social connections. That is just literally how we evolved as human beings. And I'd like to just throw it out there to you guys. Why do you think that is? Tell me why you think we're hardwired to be socially connected.
For survival.
Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, if you look at history way back when, even the cavemen, they had to be together to survive, whether it be food, gathering food, hunting food,
Yeah.
probably taking care of the group from wild animals and whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Preventing from being prey to finding prey to gathering food. We actually had to be together and work together and live together to continue to live and evolve as human beings. The same thing with movement, right? So we have been moving since we've been humans because we're moving to get food or to prevent from becoming food. It's the same thing. We've evolved through that process. I also like to mention during this call that this call is about making connections, right? This is why we have the call. We want to be in a place where we can support each other with social connections, and you get a bunch of like-minded people that are trying to accomplish something, i.e. have better health and wellness. It can go a long way for those individuals to have success in their lives because the connections actually matter. Many of you know that I have had an extremely strong passion on potentially one day either working for or building my own lifestyle medicine company where you work through the pillars of lifestyle medicine, and obviously social connection is one of those pillars. And it's what I like to call a group of people together working to support each other as the secret sauce, right? You can get a registered dietitian, a health coach, somebody that works on sleep, an exercise person to tell you information. But when you get 8, 10, 12 people in a room together to help and support each other because they're all kind of going through this together, there's a lot of power in that as well. Any other thing that comes to mind with just general life in general, where you see this as a representation of connections that can help and support each other?
Not sure what you're asking exactly.
Well, I'm just asking about other examples in our lives where connections or social connections can help and support prosperity, health, wellness, whatever that is. Anything else come to mind?
Not only, I'm
Sure.
sorry, go ahead.
I was thinking like physicians or nurses or anybody in the medical field or, you know, dietitians, coaches.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. When you say physicians and nurses, tell me about that.
Well, sometimes that's where it starts,
Yeah.
you know, where you're going and you, that people are really need help, need assistance. And that's kind of where
Right.
it's, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes a great deal. And especially when many patients or clients really look up to their doctor, their nurse, or what have you, that they're making that connection with. So I think that's an excellent point. So it matters, and it matters a great deal. I want to share with you and kind of get personal a little bit about my own life. I asked this towards the end of the presentation with you guys, but I just kind of want to talk to you about where I struggled in this area as well as what I did about it. So there's two real quick scenarios I want to bring to your attention. Can you guys see that screen getting personal on your screens? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the left-hand side, that's basically where I relocated right out of school. So this is 1989. I was in basically Clear Lake or Webster, Texas. I basically relocated from Indianapolis. And for the very first time in my life, I was literally by myself, didn't have my parents looking over my shoulders. I didn't live with any of the roommates. It was just me by myself. And I'll be honest with you, probably the first 3 or 4 weeks, there was just so much joy in the freedom that presented to me. I was like, wow, this is so great. I'm 23, 24 years old. Man, this is awesome. About the second month, so about week 5 or week 6, I started getting kind of lonely. And then I started getting kind of depressed. And I would reach out to the individuals that were my friends back in the Indianapolis area. And of course, I had, my sister Beverly was in San Antonio. My parents were in Corpus Christi. So there would be connections there, but it was obviously where I was just working and going back home and working and going back home. I was pretty much by myself. So I recognized early, with about 5-6 weeks into it, where I thought, no, this is just going to be joy and freedom, that I better do something socially to get myself adept to the trials and tribulations of life in general. So I was really focused on my intent on what I could do to really build some social connections. And I had some pretty great friendships that first year that I was in the Texas area. I got there in June of 1989, and then I moved to Galveston, and I met this girl named Grace Ann in March of 1990, and that pretty much changed everything, obviously. So that's one scenario. And then the other scenario that some of you really know about is, I pretty much retired from the Walgreens Drug Company about 4 years ago. And I have friends outside of Walgreens, but I really developed some really wonderful relationships with my coworkers, social friendships, truly, that people that primarily reported to me, but we were very much in respect of each other and cared about each other. And it was just a really wonderful place to be. And then when I flipped the switch and retired, I found myself 6 months later, these individuals were so busy with their lives and the contact point wasn't there because I wasn't seeing them sometimes multiple times a day, that there was a true significant deficiency in my life as it relates to that social connection. So that was tough, right? It was already hard enough not having the job and being in disarray and the financial piece. I mean, there was so many things coming at me, but then to obviously have the deficit from some of these wonderful, strong emotional ties was difficult. So about 18 months ago, so you fast forward a couple of years from my retirement, I recognized that deficiency, and I was very intentional about what I can do to start building some of these relationships with peers, fellow coaches. Some of you guys, I've got some pretty good relationships wise, whether I was in the process of coaching you or after coaching. And that there's been so much joy in that in the process of my life, where before I was deficient and it wasn't there. So again, I'm just going to put myself out there and just share with you guys both those scenarios where we're like, whoa, didn't kind of think this was going to happen, or didn't really plan or prepare for this. Now, what can I do to kind of zig and zag through the process of getting myself in a better, both physical and emotional state? The next slide, I like to talk about this pillar of lifestyle medicine. Is often overlooked. If probably most of you, I know for sure myself, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, tell me, what are you doing to be healthy in your life? I'm going to probably say, well, I eat a lot of plants and I move consistently. I run probably 3 miles 4 or 5 times a week. And I'm probably going to say I'm trying to get my sleep and I'm working on my stress, but I'm mostly going to overlook the comment of what I can do to connect with others on an ongoing basis. So it's often overlooked, but it's so transcendent of what it can do to impact so many of these other areas of my life. When I have social connection, In fact, I'm managing my stress better, right? I've got that person that's helping me and supporting me in that capacity. So I like to mention it because it's certainly the topic of today's call, but it's so incredibly important. And it is one truly of the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine. And those are, again, managing stress, eating more healthy, primarily plants, getting some good sleep, moving more, avoiding risky substances, so not abusing alcohol, and obviously trying to avoid cigarettes, and then of course connecting with others. So how important is it really? Is it just kind of a warm, oh, this is great, I'm connecting with this person, or is there more to it? Actually, there's a lot of data on this, and the reason that there's a picture of a cigarette on the screen is because they're showing that social isolation or loneliness has higher risks for a variety of physical, mental conditions. So it's attributed to an average of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. There's more mortality in America today because of loneliness than from smoking cigarettes, which just blows me away. So it can hurt with high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity, a weakened immune system, obviously anxiety, depression, cognitive decline. It's important that we're connecting, Alzheimer's disease, and even death. Very, very important. So I also want to share with you what social connection is not. You know, we hear the word social media. We think, well, gosh, I've got over 500 friends on Facebook. I'm really connecting with others. So just to be clear, it's not the most friends you have on Facebook that's important, although some of your friends on Facebook are probably really important to you, and you are potentially connecting with them on an ongoing basis. But it's not about having a ton of friends on Facebook. It's also not about creeping through, you know, your social feed and not really truly connecting with another individual while you're holding your device to your phone. It's not about having 10 or 15 best friends. It's also not about, on the left-hand side, they're about really just being really popular, right? That's not what social connection is. Social connection is really having at least one or two individuals, and it could be a group as well, where you connect emotionally, socially with this individual on a routine basis. It could literally be once a month, preferably something like once a week, but it could literally be once a month where you're having a cup of coffee, a Zoom call, a conversation where there's vulnerability, there's trust, there's rapport. Everybody needs one or two, more it is even better. So again, why, this is the opposite of what the other slide says, but why is this so incredibly important? Obviously, it lowers anxiety and depression. This is all evidence-based information. It helps us to regulate our emotions, right? Having that sounding board leads to higher self-esteem and empathy. It actually improves our immune system. When we have those connections in our life, we're not going to be as sick. We're not going to suffer as greatly when we have illness that comes our way. By neglecting our need for connection, we're actually putting our health at risk. Why else is this important? It's actually been shown people with healthy and supportive relationships live longer, actually 7 years longer than somebody that's in social isolation. And these effects are surprisingly strong over the course of studies, 7 years longer. So it's important for that reason as well. And I wanted to share with you the irony of COVID's imposed isolation. But before I talk about some of the really sad things that happened with this, there was obviously a necessity to have that. I'm not saying we should not have been isolated, because we probably saved hundreds and thousands of lives because people were socially distancing themselves and really not going out in social situations. So that was certainly necessary. But the irony is that with that imposed isolation that was probably unfortunately necessary, we're all aware of some of the really scary statistics that came out because of this, right? The last couple of years, alcohol abuse has gone through the roof. Suicide has increased significantly, depression, obesity, and anxiety as well. So again, it really matters a great deal. So some of you may have heard of this survey that had come out, where it's a survey of folks that were actually on their deathbed and dying. And individuals had gone out to them and asked them, hey, tell us What are some of the regrets that you have? And they've made a book out of it called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. Number 1 is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. So this is about authenticity. I wish I hadn't worked so hard, right? So this is a little bit about priorities. Number 3 was, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. That's about vulnerability. Number 5 is, I wish I'd let myself be happier, right? That's about joy. And the 4th one is exactly what we're talking about. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends, having those social connections. So how can we leverage this, take advantage of this amazing wisdom that these people who are literally getting ready to die in the next weeks or months, and use it for us in the prime of our life? Just kind of think about that. Having said that, there's some reasons why this doesn't necessarily happen as readily as it could, right? So I know for sure this slide and the next slide are really slides that I made for myself, but it's probably rings true for a lot of the folks on this call as well. So lack of knowledge. I was not aware in my almost 30 years with Walgreens, as I put the friendship piece on the back burner on a consistent basis, how important it was for me not to do that, right? So just didn't know how important it was. I would hear from my wife to say, hey, why don't you go out with your buddies or what have you? And it was always on the back burner because my family and the job were the priority. And I really let the friendship piece kind of go by the wayside to my detriment, unfortunately. Distractions, right? It's easy to get involved with what's going on the phone and with email and with social media, etc. Very, very easy to do that, especially in today's day and age. Time, very much a limited resource, which harkens back to what I was mentioning before. Because we are only who we are, we only have 24 hours in the day. We've got to prioritize to what we think is the most important. So it's definitely a challenge as it relates to trying to connect socially with others. So the next slide is what I think, again, this is just my opinion, is probably the biggest reason what prevents us as a roadblock of actually connecting with others. It's the fear, the vulnerability, right? So this quote is by Brene Brown, is a huge vulnerability proponent. She states, vulnerability is our most accurate measurement of courage. So I'd like to ask you guys, is there anything else that comes to mind you see as a roadblock that potentially could be getting in the way of, not necessarily in your own life, but just in general, getting in the way of having those social connections?
Well, I think with the vulnerability piece,
Mm-hmm.
that's absolutely true. There's a lot that goes with that, because it could be, in my case, it's physical issues that make me sensitive, whether it be my weight, whether it be my mobility. And so those are always hard to enter into a situation socially. Sometimes this is probably the opposite of what you're thinking, but sometimes some social connections, I think, can be tough and maybe even toxic sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be social situations where they're part of your life. So you deal with it or you don't, so that's, anyway, that's just my 2 cents for now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one issue is vulnerability as it relates to potentially physical issues that could be a roadblock. And the other one is just potentially toxic bad history that maybe brings up the fear or the doubt in wanting to pursue that with individuals, which causes a challenge as well with social connection. Cool. Thank you for sharing. Anything else come to mind for anybody else as it relates to roadblocks to making those social connections? Okay. So I just I'm throwing out a couple of ideas to potentially help individuals that are interested in building this. These aren't obviously the end all and be all. There's probably hundreds of different ways. based on the individual's personality, what makes the most sense for them. But these are just two that could offer, just suggestions to help and support individuals. They are called Reach Out and Lift Up. So a little bit about Reach Out. Reach Out is really the simple process of thinking about people in your past that you have connected with. These are probably individuals that maybe you don't connect with very often anymore, and potentially that you have a desire to reach out to that individual and connect with them. So I probably could come up with 20 to 25 people. Just so you know that I've actually personally done this when I talked to you guys about 18 months ago, where I was like, you know what, I really want to start building some of these relationships. What can I do? This is one way that I did this, especially with guys. This is like, for whatever reason, with me, with girls, I'm a lot more comfortable. I can be more vulnerable. With guys, to me, it's more difficult. So I really wanted to push myself. So I actually made a list of a number of gentlemen that I wanted to reach out to say, hey, thinking of you. I sent them texts. I'd love to get together soon and catch up. Hope you're doing well. So some of these individuals on a monthly basis, I'm having breakfast with. Some of them I'm having Zoom calls with. One I went to college with, one I went to high school with, and there's just so much joy there. So just think about that. It could be a call, it could be a text, it could be an email. If you come up with 5 names, my guess is probably all 5, but for sure, one of those individuals is going to respond in kind with, that sounds great. And then we can say what works for you. And then you can logistically make that connection. Yeah, so that's called Reach Out. The other one is called Lift Up. And it's similar, but this is categorized by Lift Up because you recognize people in your life that are in need of help or support, right? So it could be people at work, could be people if you're in school, it could be needing help with school. It could be somebody in the neighborhood. It could be any number of people. And really all you do is reach out to that individual and offer help and support. And then the social connection can go from there. When this happens, that individual obviously receives joy, but also the person that's giving the help and support receives joy as well. So what else? What are some other examples of what this could look like in making that social connection as it relates to Lift Up? What context do you think makes sense?
Just maybe some of the connections, like support in terms of like this group, for example.
Okay.
The issues that we're dealing with, like a group, other way, where you support each other, you listen to each other's concerns and
Yeah.
worries and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then try to, kind of support each other in that capacity.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anything else come to mind?
Sometimes financially. That's not necessarily a healthy way to get into some stuff, but sometimes, especially really close people, occasionally need a little bit of help financially.
Okay. Yeah.
That can be dangerous. That can backfire if you're not careful, but.
Right. It could be a slippery slope, but it has the
Right.
potential to maybe help somebody else. Okay. Anything else come to mind for anybody?
Mike, I don't think it's an accident that many of us are in middle age on the call, and that there's a certain amount of, I think, reevaluation one makes, as we get older about our health and on every level. One of the things that I've noticed in healthcare, for instance, is that young nurses really need to be lifted up.
Yeah.
The system of mentoring that was in place when I was a young nurse really is not so much anymore. And I know that's not exclusive to healthcare. I hear that a lot in other, especially helping professions. So, I think of educators and other social service professions and so on and so forth. So, identifying these young people, because we could debate all evening why the systems are not supporting the young practitioners like they used to.
Right.
That's not the point. The point is, what could each of us do in our small circle of influence to at least focus on the young and check in with them and maybe try and mentor them a little bit and support them.
Yeah, huge. Great. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Mike, one thing I did with, we've got a new sales manager,
Mhm.
been with us just over a year now. But when our last new guy came on for down south,
Mhm.
he sent him with me. And when we were done, and he's real good about doing evaluations, asking questions. What
Mhm.
what could we be doing better in this process? And I suggested to him, I said, hey, why don't you consider, go ahead and have them work in our territory with us like you do for a day or two, but
Mhm.
also let us walk with them in their territory and just watch and listen and
Yeah.
see if there's anything, because of our experience, we can help them with.
Yeah.
So he's put that into place on a new guy we got in Missouri. We're going to actually, both the new guys will, the new guy will be riding with the older guy, but then in return, we'll be able to be in his territory with him and helping him out through things we see.
Yeah.
So,
Great. So at work, another great example of ways you can help and support another individual. That's great. Anything else?
One I just thought of would be when people are really either sick or needing extra support,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
where we can reach out in whatever capacity that means
Yeah.
to support them or lift them.
Yeah. Great example. Very good. Anything else? All right. Thank you guys for sharing on that. And just, I think when Beverly was talking in the beginning, or when Bev was talking in the beginning, I wrote down buddy, because part of the program for Double S is to, if the individuals are interested, is to pair buddies, right? To help and support each other. So it kind of made me think a little bit about what's many people on this call have done to help and support that other individual that's pursuing movement or plants or trying to get me be more healthy. And just that is another way where you can lift somebody else up, and just by reaching out and supporting that individual. So, but also all those things you guys share are such great examples of reaching out or lifting up. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to close it out in just a minute, but not only obviously does this add years to your life by being typically socially connected, but it also adds life to your years. I always like to use that play on words. So really the last two slides, if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to open it up and just ask, where do you feel like you've had some success with personal connections? Like I said in the beginning, I recognize areas where there was a detriment there, and kind of what I did to try to flip the switch. Some of that was intentional, and some of that was like, it just kind of happened where I needed to do something differently, but maybe there wasn't as much intention there. But maybe where can you share where you've had a win with social connection and you're really happy with that from the past or even currently going on? What do you guys think?
Well, for me, even though I know I pay you, just your connection all the time, all the little things that I need support with, and help with, and how you're willing, I know I pay you, but that's beside the point. How you help me in so many areas. And then also connected to that is, like you said, the buddies thing with Susan.
Mhm.
I talk to her once a week, and so that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. That's great. So some wins there for Bev. Great. What else comes to mind as wins where there's been some social connection that's been a great benefit to you?
I think it's important. I hate to be the one that keeps talking. I hope other people just, if you jump in, I'll shut up. But I think it's important to have different ages within our lives of connections. I mean, I've got some little kids that I kind of babysit for, but they're really kind of like my adopted kids,
Mhm.
or and elderly people. I mean, I'm actually getting into that category of what we consider elderly, but
Mhm.
I think it's important to have an age range, not just your own little group of 40, 50, whatever.
Right.
Anyway,
So I agree with you, Bev, 100%. Tell me why you think that is, why you think that's important.
because for me, it brings joy and perspective, because the joy of children is there's no comparison.
Yeah.
Also the joy of nature and animals. I mean, that's a different kind of connection, but I do think those are also important connections. But the joy of listening to people who have lived and experienced a ton of stuff that maybe we have and maybe we haven't.
Sure.
There's a lot of wisdom. So
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Can you hear me, Mike and everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay. I reached out on Facebook a long time ago and I met Shannon,
Mm-hmm.
and then Shannon, over time, I met Shannon's sister, and I met you, and then I met Bev and everyone on this call, and lots of people, and also I think volunteering and being at church sometimes can lead to valuable friendships as well. I volunteer at the Humane Society on Sundays, and I met some really neat young ladies. Yeah, they're like 18, 20 years old,
Yeah.
and they're really very interesting and fun and fascinating to be around as well. And Bev is just priceless. We talk once a week, and I mean, I even went up there and visited her, and we spent the day together, and
That's awesome.
it's just really been very rewarding the last couple of years, even then especially after COVID, but even somewhat during COVID, I was connected, but it's gotten a lot better now that COVID is over. So
Mhm.
I'm very grateful for all that. But those are some of the things some of the places where I've met people. And the thing of it is, when I started volunteering also for the Humane Society, I met first call I made to the leader over there. She told me she was a vegetarian. So I was like, yes, and so many things have opened up here lately with the plant-based eating.
Mhm.
It's funny how me and my husband make connections. When a new connection we're about to make is a urologist. She was on TV the other day on Great Day St. Louis, and she's a vegan urologist we're gonna go likely way over in Chesterfield, meet up with her, so she'll be a new connection.
Oh, wow.
But we just kind of go along the plant-based lines and along the health lines and
Mhm.
follow our interests, and that's really how we end up how me and my husband both end up meeting more people and making more connections, and it's very much fun and very interesting.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you so much for sharing. That's wonderful. There's a lot there with the volunteering, the doctor, the friendships, like-minded people doing the same kinds of things. Your buddy with Bev. That's fantastic. I'm so glad that's helping you and that's supportive.
Oh, and you know about this one, but I met a new connection in the produce department. We were just talking and
Oh, yeah.
and struck up a conversation, and she ended up having the same doctor I do, and anyway, the same plant-based doctor, and so we actually talked today on the phone. So that was really nice. It's been a good journey.
That's fantastic. Anybody else have wins that they'd like to share, whether that was friendships, family, mentorships, being mentored? What comes to mind?
this is sort of I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, one of the things, vulnerability is the keystone that, as mentioned earlier, one of the things that, again, as a healthcare professional, one of the difficulties of a life of professionally caregiving for others, and I'm certainly not alone in this, the profession is rife with struggle because we tend to give our best away on the job and then do not self-care well.
Yeah.
And then wonder why, and then we become resentful and rather than ask for help, because of course, we're the shall answer person, right, for our patients.
Right.
We just nurse struggle, and in my case, it was substances
Mhm.
that became an easier way to deal with that than vulnerability. Vulnerability is hard, and especially when you are, in my case, using alcohol to numb feelings,
Mhm.
and then that gets covered with shame, and then you're like, well, I can't tell anybody this because everybody thinks I'm this way.
Right.
And so the vulnerability to finally sort of come clean with that,
Yeah.
and to get on a recovery journey, and to connect with folks that are struggling. One of the best things I've ever heard is, secrets shared lose their power. A secret exposed to the light of honesty loses its power. And so in my case, when I'm in a group of people that have shared a similar struggle, I feel like I'm talking to people that have earned the right to hear my story
Yeah.
and to hear my particular struggle, and my vulnerability quotient has increased so dramatically as a result of my recovery journey. And this, came later in life,
Yeah.
but it's expanded my growth. I mean, part of the reason that I'm in this group is because I had to deal with the elimination of something that was really holding me back.
Right.
So eliminate some toxic things, and then also add the healthy things. So, that has been really key, I think, to every other part of my life.
Yeah, I appreciate the vulnerability in your statement as well. And I don't know that I've heard that secret shared loses its power. That's very, very powerful right there. That statement can go a long way in helping and supporting individuals. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
John, you have a lot of those good little quick lessons in life.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. I listen to a lot of really smart people. I'll give them the credit.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
John, where do you get all those?
I suppose. Well, anyway, Tim and I, it's funny because I'll say this. One of the other things that I think, and men are not very good in America about this, but I'm not sure it's exclusive to America, but let's think about America and the way that America affirms our value by what we do.
Right.
And so work is, you can work, yourself into an early grave, and everybody will say that, you're the greatest thing ever, because it's all about productivity and blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And, so one of the things that I have had to learn, as also a workaholic, is, to realize that some of the best work that I can do is in the connection space.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be biblical, but this happens to work for me. And, the model is Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy. And again, this does not have to be Christian. It does not have to be scriptural at all, but it's just a framework within which, Paul represents an older person who, built into your life and is now a mentor. Barnabas represents a peer who is walking with you and, holding you accountable, but also providing you with support. And then Timothy is a younger man, and you're building into his life, as a mentor. And so I love that, notion of connecting real purposefully.
Yeah.
And that's what I've really tried to do a lot more effectively, especially in recovery.
Yeah. That's great. Awesome.
well,
Thank you
and
so
what
much for
John was
sharing.
saying about recovery as far as alcoholism or substance abuse or whatever can be applied completely, I think, to food,
Yeah.
because that's been my substance abuse. And it's,
Sure.
it's a different, anyway, we're getting off the subject, but anyway.
In a way, I second all that, because I think recovery groups are important, and you can meet very nice, wonderful people through there,
Yeah.
whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Al-Anon,
Right.
Emotions Anonymous, and there's even a Clutters Anonymous. So there's all kind of groups for all kind of people to connect and
Yeah.
to get better and to support each other. So I really second that. I mean, I'm not afraid or ashamed at all to head off to any one of those kinds of
Mhm.
meetings. So it's really brings a lot of peace and like-minded people.
Yeah,
Sometimes you'll run into some people that are just really way out there, but then again, not so much. And I've met some long, long friendships.
yeah,
I don't remember how long I've known this one gal, but she and I are friends for a long, long time.
that's awesome.
So, yeah.
Very good. Lots of great stuff there. So certainly, you know, to finish it out here, we want to eat our broccoli, right? We want to eat our plants.
Oh, yeah.
We want to move more, but really the opportunity with a lot of folks, many people, including myself on this call, is what can we do to be intentional about recognizing the opportunity to move the needle, right? So you're certainly welcome to share at this point, but I just asked for at a minimum, a personal reflection of where you are. 1 being, I feel very lonely and isolated. 10 being, you feel extreme contentment and fulfillment in the capacity of social connection. Could be with friends, could be with family. Again, doesn't matter, just as long as you've got a few of those where you feel like you're in a good place. Wherever you are on that, if your number is, you feel like you need to improve your number, what does that potentially look like? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. th- uh, I just from a background standpoint, I worked for myself most of my life,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't have I didn't have like colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly if you do have employees, you can't be their friends too a lot of times.
Definitely.
And then I worked in a very inauthentic space,
Mm-hmm.
so I really didn't socialize with the people peers of mine in the workspace. And you know, I abused alcohol for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and that has a way of isolating you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I retired a year and a half ago, and I lived in Springfield, and I didn't have a lot of strong connections there.
Right.
And I find it very challenging to make connections at this stage of my life.
Sure.
And I'm not surprised that John is on this call, because he's an amazing human being, and we don't know each other well, but we're like-minded.
Mm-hmm.
But I have had the experience where I've worked, not worked at, but if I meet somebody, I'll and I feel like I've got a connection with them, I will try to trade contact information with them and say, hey, and honestly,
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't worked very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm coming off as creepy or what,
Sure.
but I don't think I am. But it just seems like people are in there. I think I think as you get older, if you don't have that base of friendships,
Mm-hmm.
for various reasons, I think people get into their tribes and they really don't want to come out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's particularly true of men,
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
because men don't say, gee, let's go to dinner and a movie together.
Right.
Men, I think, relate shoulder to shoulder, not face to face, better.
Right.
And so I find it very hard. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons I got on this tonight, because I'm a really new client of yours,
Right.
and I it's funny because I said in the beginning, Mike, I said, I'm going to pay you to be my friend, and you haven't done a very good job of that so far. But
My apologies.
but for the amount of money I'm paying you, damn it, call me every day. No, but so so, I mean, unfortunately, I put myself pretty low on that scale.
Mhm.
And that's it. I mean, I'm talking like a couple of years of kind of working at it,
Mhm.
and it just doesn't seem like it worked. Now that I've got, you know, so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just, that's the reason I was really intrigued by this Zoom
Mhm.
meeting tonight.
Yeah. No, it totally answers my question. And I mean, this is obviously something you and I have discussed, and I'm excited about working with you in that capacity. Your vulnerability to your answer was so wonderful. I really appreciate your just openness, and
Mhm.
that's
And Tim,
extremely.
I would like to say to you that hang in there with Mike, because you will get your money's worth.
Well, we'll see.
The jury's out.
I would like to share too that I use the warm line through the state of Illinois. And if you're a state of Illinois resident, you can call every day if you want and talk for 20 minutes. And I've met some very interesting people on there as well that I talk to frequently. And I really enjoy that. Mike's got that number somewhere along the line in case you
Right.
want to talk to somebody every day.
You know, and see, I'm not telling the whole story because the other piece of this is I really don't like talking on the phone, and that's probably because I did so much while I was working. So I want, you know, I own part of this, so it's
Yeah.
not just other people.
Yep. Again, great conversation. Really appreciate it. Anything else from anybody else before we close it out?
No, I just really appreciate everybody's openness on this call.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key point, and that's been something that I've noticed, that when I too, as a nurse for years, was a caretaker, and you never knew anything underlying was going on with me. And mental health is my issue, depression, anxiety, all that. So
Yeah.
tends to run in the family. Now my kids have it, so it's, you're dealing with that, and then you hide and go through phases. But then when I get to that point, like I've been so better about it, reaching out to parents and friends and what have you in the past. And then I find when I do open up, oh my gosh, they're all going through the same thing too.
Mhm.
Makes the conversation so much easier. And you always hear that you're not alone. You're not alone. Everybody goes through it. But I do find that by listening to others as they
Mhm.
listen to you, it does help.
Yeah.
And it makes me realize, hey, I am okay, so
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Very good stuff. All right. We are at time. So I'm going to close it out, but I just want to say how much I appreciate everybody. I'm going to stop recording here.